Buenos dias, everybody. It's Matt Ross and Owen Wolf coming back at you with another video. What are we talking about today? Well, as you know, I've been exploring around the city of Livingstone, Guatemala, also known as La Buga and Garifuna. And what I want to talk about today is the gift of humility, or the importance of understanding that we all walk with our 2 feet on the ground. We all walk with our feet on the ground, those of us that are able. What do I mean by that? As I start to meet the people here in Livingstone, I'm reminded of, a small town culture where I come from, which is I was born in Melfort, Saskatchewan, where people got a chance to, we actually talk to our neighbors and everything like that, which is, not something that I necessarily do anymore while I'm in Toronto. Like, I know, for example, in my old place, living in Toronto, and I know one neighbor. I've got probably 20 neighbors, but I know one neighbor. And I don't say hello to anybody. And I think as you go through life, and as I go through life, I'm reminded of the importance of humility, why being humble is such a gift, because many of us forget that we all walk on the ground, and depending on where you live, you can have many different creature comforts and things. Look at this doggy. You have many different creature comforts and buenas. Many different creature comforts, and you get used to living in a certain way. You get used to living what you might call the high life, or you just get used to everything working all the time. And you can sometimes forget that everything doesn't always work. So try to get out here early. A lot of people out still. Buenos dias. So, like, when I'm walking through the streets of Livingstone, like, for example, right now, when people walk by, they say buenos dias, hello. It's a small thing, but it's something that's a big thing too, because you tend to get to know your neighbor a little bit more when everybody's saying hello to each other. And we always think our problems are bigger than the whole world, you know what I mean? I do, sometimes. And ultimately, no matter where you are, you have similar types of problems. But in Canada, I'm used to a lot more, I guess, infrastructure, you would say. So it's a little bit more advanced when it comes to technology and, you know, that sort of thing, whether it be roads and plumbing and that sort of thing. But sometimes when you live in a culturally in like an advanced technology society, you forget that you came from the earth. We all come from the earth. We all walk on the earth. And you can become, you can think people can get lost, kind of like Icarus flying too close to the sun. You forget that we all walk with our 2 feet on the ground. And you can get a higher sense of yourself. You can become, even as an entire culture, as an entire nation, you can become a little bit more egotistical when you compare yourself to, well, you shouldn't be comparing, but when you go and live in other kind of cultures and societies. So when you meet people, don't be afraid to say hello. And do your best to form some sort of a nice little bond. Just even if it's just a nice social contract of saying hello. You know, I mean, I get it. You don't always want to say hello to everybody all the time. But, you know, when you get on the elevator in your condo or in your office where you work, it can't hurt to say hello to people and ask them how their day is going. They might be having a crap day, and you might be able to be the one that helps bring them out of that crap day by just having a real human conversation with them. And, you know, one other thing too, as you go through life, you start to realize how different things can control you. For example, possessions. Possessions have a lot of control over you, whether you really you believe it or not. Because, well, for example, I have an example. You become attached to like your cell phone, for example. And, you know, a lot of people say my whole life's on my cell phone. It's on my smartphone, whatever you want to call it these days. And if you lose that phone, it can be very devastating. Well, I've lost all my pictures, I've lost all my passwords, I've lost, you know, and then you start kind of going into a spiral. And you realize you don't realize how attached you are to something until you lose it. And then what you have to understand is that attachment is unhealthy. It's not good for you to be attached to things that much. And I realized that myself, and how easily losing something or being attached to something, how being attached to something, how that can lead to you ruining your day. So when you start to realize you're attached to something, that means that whatever the thing that you're attached to can control you. So, for example, and it can take possession of you. That feeling, or that feeling of losing your cell phone, or that feeling of losing losing your girlfriend, or whatever the case may be. You start to identify with that feeling, and that feeling possesses you, almost like a spirit would, like when you see on the movies, it possesses you. And we can be possessed by so many different things. Emotions can possess us if you allow them to. And I'm not saying that you suppress them, but let's say you're angry. You get angry over your lost cell phone, let's say. Are you going to let that feeling, are you going to identify with the feeling of anger? Because you're going to know, okay, I'm angry, the cell phone's lost, let's say, for example. And then what happens if you allow that anger to possess you? Then you could start being mean, and you can say things you don't necessarily mean, or it bubbles things to the surface, and then it takes over your whole being, and then you just become one with the anger, and then your vibe is your vibe starts kind of going off to other people, and you start kind of giving bad energy off to people, and then and that energy kind of spreads. So when you are feeling a certain way, when you have feelings of anger, you have feelings of jealousy, you have feelings of sadness, the key is to recognize, hey, there is sadness there is anger there is jealousy there. I'm not telling you to ignore it, just it is there. But now the most important thing is that I will not identify with it. So rather than saying, I am sad, I am angry, I am jealous, just say, there is jealousy there. Recognize that there's jealousy there, and let the jealousy, you can still feel the jealousy. But don't let the jealousy take you over. Don't let the jealousy possess you. Don't let the anger possess you. Don't let the emotion possess you. Because it can, and it will, and it will. And when you allow that types of stuff to happen to you, that's when you start making the worst decisions of your life. And you have to understand is what you need to recognize is that there is jealousy there is anger there is sadness there. And you feel through it, but you have to also understand that this too will pass. This too will pass. The anger will pass. The sadness will pass. I don't know if you can get through here this way. Maybe we'll go up, down the other way. And I think the key is just recognizing that there's that feeling. You see it, you're aware of it, and you let it know. You're not going to let it possess you. And that's when you think about the human interaction, when you think about people in general, and you think about how the news or politics, they drive these feelings, and they really play with people's emotions by dividing them, for example, dividing people, and then wedging people and making people say, okay, pick somebody that they think is a buenas, and dividing people against people that they think are wrong. So basically they teach you how to hate other people, even though, so Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, liberals, they teach you to hate each other over stupid things, like political things, which is ridiculous, because if you sat down with each other, you had a scale in front of you, and one side is things you have in common, one side is things you don't have in common. What do you think is going to win out? We have way more in common than we do differences. So why are we allowing these differences, the few differences, to divide us and make us think a certain way? So when you start disliking somebody for their political views, and only their political views, understand that is pretty much somebody else controlling you. Somebody else is trying to do that on purpose. And you got to take a step back And sometimes we need to come off of our high, what we think is our higher moral, buenos dias, of our higher moral ground, what we think is our inflation, our place of superiority, where we think that we are correct, and come down to earth, put our feet on the ground, and remember, it doesn't matter what your political views are, you both walk on the ground, and we need to not allow ourselves, our sense of importance to be inflated. Because there's nothing worse than being possessed by your ego. And that's really what it comes down to. When you think that your position is morally right and the other person is morally wrong, and because you're morally right, you think that you can say and do whatever you want to these other people. That's not how it works. I think it's important for us to accept the fact that other people might think differently, and you may not agree on some things. I remember back in the 80s and 90s, man. First of all, nobody would even reveal who they were voting for. You would keep it a secret. I remember it wasn't really a topic that people discussed as much, and it was a secret. People wouldn't tell you who they voted for. And then all the way, somewhere along the way, it started becoming so much more. So many more things were getting involved. Celebrities were getting involved, trying to tell you who to vote for, and then, sports stars and you name it. And all of a sudden, it became this big deal: vote or die. And if you vote one way, you're racist, and you vote another way, you're not racist. You vote this way, you're a communist. You vote this way, you're a capitalist. You know what I mean? It's just divisions. At the end of the day, the person that's sitting in that high tower, in that high position, the president or the prime minister or the king or the queen, they're not in your neighborhood. They're not on your streets. They're not walking on the ground you're walking on. They think they're better than you. That's the reality. And they not only do they think it, they may not. The only thing is they don't say it, but they definitely show it. They definitely live it. How come, if you look at Canada, for example, you have the person that's the leader of the Workers' Party, is what it's called, which has historically been a party for the people, apparently. The party started with Tommy Douglas, and the leader of that party is driving a Maserati. Don't you think there's a bit of a disconnect there? How is the leader of the People's Party, of the Workers' Party, of the people that are just your average class, your average regular Joe, how is that person running around driving luxury vehicles, wearing Armani suits, Louis Vuitton bags? Can't you see that there is something wrong with that? And that there's something hypocritical about that? And listen, and I'm just talking in general. I could say anything about any political leader. It could be him. It could be. I could say bad things about any one of them. And so could you. You know that there's bad things about every one of them. So if you could say a whole bunch of bad things about, let's imagine your life. Let's say you have a friend in your life, and that friend in your life was just like a politician that was in charge of a country, who constantly lied to you, constantly stole your money through taxes, constantly told you that you weren't as good as everybody else, constantly said you're garbage. If you had a friend like that in your life, would you keep that friend in your life? Would you? If they stole from you, if they talked behind your back, if they told you how to live a one way while they live another way, would you keep that friend in your life? Buenas. Would you keep that friend in your life? Probably not. So when we talk about inflation, we talk about keeping your feet on the ground. A great example of not having your feet on the ground is how politicians live, act. They say one thing, they do another. It's okay for them to lie. It's okay for them to steal. It's okay for them to kill. If you had a friend like that, would you keep that friend in your life? Unlikely. Highly unlikely. And when you yourself, or myself, when you yourself, have you ever been in a situation where you were feeling really good about life? Like you're killing it. And then you became maybe a little too inflated. You become a little egotistical. And then the great thing is when you have a friend around you, which is always nice, is when you have a friend around you. Buenas. And hopefully you have a friend around you that can pop your balloon and bring your ego down back and bring you back to earth and remind you, hey man, or hey woman, you're not better than everybody else. This is a very important thing to have in life. True friends are the ones that when you get too inflated or when you become too egotistical, they bring you back down to earth. When you get too close to the earth and you become too depressed, you become really down on yourself, they bring you back up. Just like the king and the fool. Do you know what the purpose of the fool was in the king's court? The fool was the only one that really truly spoke the truth to the king. And the point of the fool was to ensure the king actually knew what the people thought, what was going on, what the people or the aristocrats thought. And he was the one that would he was the dragon that would bring the king back down to earth if he became too inflated or he became too prideful, too intoxicated with his own greatness. The fool was the one that had to bring him back down. The fool was the one that would bring him up. So let's go this way. We all need a fool or fools in our lives to help us through the good times and help us through the bad times, to understand that good and bad, who's to say? You never know if something's good completely. Because sometimes, think about how many people have won the lottery and it turned out to be the worst thing that's ever happened to them. It drove them to lose their families, and some of them lost their lives over what some people would think is the greatest thing that ever could happen to you, is winning the lottery. So when good things happen to you, you don't necessarily know if they're good until later on when you have some hindsight. But even then, there could be a bigger plan at play. So don't become too attached to feeling so great about an accomplishment you may have had, or feeling so down about a failure you may have had, because that failure could be the thing that could be the reason why, or the lesson that you learned that help you become yourself, to help you really truly identify what you're supposed to be, what you're meant to do on this planet. Tuk tuk. And your greatest accomplishment in your mind could lead you to your own death if you don't accept and treat it as right. Treat it right. Another thing about coming back to earth or making sure you understand to have your 2 feet on the ground is like let's think about warriors. I want to talk a little bit about the warrior and the warrior spirit. In the old times, in the ancient times, when a warrior would go off to battle, he would, well, they would go off, they would fight their battle, and once the battle was done, they would come back and the people would host a big dance around a huge bonfire. And the soldiers would dance their way around the bonfire and dance that violence out of them, dance themselves back into normal life. It was a ritual so that you could bring people back once they went off and they did something as terrifying and as stressful and as horrifying as going to war. The people knew, ancient people knew, that to bring them back into the regular society, they had to have a ritual and honor what they had done and then dance themselves back into reality. Buenas. And dance themselves back into reality. Nowadays, when people go to war, when the soldiers go off to war, they're not warriors anymore, they're soldiers. There is a difference between a warrior spirit and a soldier spirit. But when they come back from war, so when they come back from, and they really started seeing this in Vietnam, in Iraq, but when they come back from war, there's no way to reintroduce these people back into society. There's no ritual to help bring them back to normal life. They just bring them back and say, thanks for your service, appreciate your service. They might have a parade, and then they say, good luck with the rest of your life. I mean, think about it. If you just went off and you killed a whole bunch of people, or you did a whole bunch of things like that, and you came back to regular life, do you think you would just come back and be normal? Right? So when you start thinking about what happens with all the addiction within the veterans, the alcohol addiction, drug addiction, whatever it is, you start to, buenas, you start to see a pattern. Pattern emerges. And you realize that we need to find a way to help reintroduce these people. First of all, honor what they had done. Hopefully there was honor in what they did do. For me personally, I really don't like the idea of war, but sometimes it can't be avoided. But find a way to reintroduce them to society, honor what they had done, and dance them back to reality. And again, this is coming back down to earth, keeping your feet on the ground. And when I live, and when I'm in a place like La Buga or like Livingstone, it's not as technically advanced as Canada is. So the infrastructure is not going to be as good. The electricity is not as good. The plumbing is not as good. But the people aren't living the work. They're working to live. And they still have their traditions. Yesterday I was out in the streets and I saw this huge dance celebration. I'm going to put a short on it. You're going to see it, but it was incredible. I've never seen anything like it. An incredible dance celebration. And they still have their dance culture, and they kind of mix the Garifuna culture and the Mayan culture together, and they both appreciate it. They both appreciate each other's food. And it's pretty incredible. And so I'm going to show you some of that. But the one thing that they do is they have a sense of themselves. They have a sense of their culture. And it was funny because I was talking to a lot of the Garifuna people, and one of their main big concerns, one of their big concerns is the language is being lost. The Garifuna language is being lost on the youth. A lot of them are choosing to speak Spanish and English, and they're not choosing to speak Garifuna. So some of the elders, which is another thing that's kind of been lost in our society, is they don't really, and we don't really appreciate in Canada, in America, we don't really appreciate our elders as much as we should. Here in Livingstone, if you have like a lady that's a little older than you, or a man that's a little older than you, a little bit more experienced than you, somebody that's done something that's earned respect amongst the people, you refer to them as tia if it's a female, or tio if it's a male, as a sign of respect. And you respect your elders. The kids take care of their grandparents. The kids take care of their aunties. The kids they all help each other out. It's very impressive. And, family is very important. And you would not see here somebody just placing their mother in a home. You know what I mean? They will have somebody, they'll either take care of their elderly. I've seen it many times. They take care of their elderly parents amongst the family. They might put their money together. The family might put their money together and help hire somebody to help take care of her, help do the day-to-day stuff. But still, they'll have people coming in and out to help support this person, because family is still very important here. And elders, they still respect their elders here, and I've seen it on many occasions. So like even Paula, she comes here and she's got many grandmas, aunties, tias, abuelas, tios, and she makes sure to go and say hello to all of them and visit with them and get to know them, and just make sure that she pays her respect to the elders and make sure they understand we still love you, still appreciate you, we still care about you. And I really think that that's an important grounding. It's a grounding quality, because what's the best way when you get inflated, when you get egotistical, when you get prideful? What's the best way to? Who's some people that are going to be able to bring you back down to earth? It's going to be your family. Your family is going to be the one that helps set your feet, helps you plant your feet again on the ground. And a lot of times, you're going to have some really good friends that are going to do that for you as well. But ultimately, somebody that, when your brother or your sister or your dad or your grandma or your uncle, if they sit down and have a real conversation with you and say, listen, man, your attitudes, you're becoming way too egotistical. People are not liking you. You've lost your way. You're not who you are. Then that's going to help ground you. So I do appreciate that, even though it may not be as technically sound here. They have a lot more. They're more down to earth. They're not high up in the sky of a condo building. You know what I mean? We even live high in the sky. You know what I mean? They live a lot closer to the earth. There are chickens running around, and there's goats and there's pigs, and they're all, it's quite a bit different, and it's not as structured. Now, I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm saying everything's got its ups and downs. And over here, just the beautiful ocean. You live by the ocean. You know how cool that is? So, whenever you find yourself feeling too important, take your shoes off, walk outside, put your feet on the ground, call a family member that you truly respect, or an elder you truly respect. and understand that whether you're high on pride or you're low on depression, that this too will pass. And don't identify yourself with the feeling, with the emotion. Understand that it's there. Recognize that there it is. But say to yourself and understand, I accept that that's there. But I will not let it possess me. I will not let it take me over. And understand another thing. No matter how fancy somebody's clothes are, or how fancy somebody's uniform is, that doesn't mean that they're better than you. Just because you dress like the president of the United States of America, or you dress like a police officer, or you dress like a judge, or you dress like a priest, or you dress like somebody in parliament. Just because you have a fancy uniform, or a fancy costume, I should call it, doesn't make you better than anybody else. Just because you have fancy clothes, just because you have nicer shoes than everybody else, doesn't make you better than anybody else. At the end of the day, when you take off all the clothes, and you take off your shoes, take off your underwear, and you're all standing there naked, what does that make you? Well, it makes you human, naked and human. And nobody is there walking around in their fancy clothes trying to show everybody else that they're better than you. Because at the end of the day, when you take off all the costumes and all the uniforms and all the clothes, all that's left is a man. All that's left is a woman. And when you're naked, that's when you can truly realize that we're all just human beings having a human experience. It's so funny to think about it like that. But that's exactly what it is. So next time you're in another country and you meet the people and you see how things are, understand that just because we might have a better infrastructure, whatever the case may be, doesn't mean we're better. And that there's a lot of things we can learn from people in different countries that live differently. That work to live, not live to work. That still have a sense of community, like real community, not online community. Like, people know each other here. And people talk to each other here. So, don't forget that. At the end of the day, we're all just a bunch of human beings. So remember that when your ego gets too much, you want somebody around to pop it. When you get too down, you want somebody to bring you up. Sometimes you're the king, sometimes you're the fool. Sometimes both. Because you can be the fool for a friend, and your friend can be a fool for you. And you could be the king, and your friend could be the fool helping you. So remember, put your feet on the ground. When you wake up in the morning, put your feet on the ground. And that's the first accomplishment. I'm the Gnome Wolf. I'm Matt Ross. Buenas.